At Dave Cooper Live, we connect the industry leaders in the architectural, engineering, and construction space with the people, the products, and the processes to help them build it better. All right, welcome everybody. Every offsite manufacturer faces the same nightmare. Stockouts that kill production time and burn through profits. But what if there was a formula to prevent it before it even happens? Today on Dave Cooper Live, we're joined by Bob Snyder, CEO of Summit Supply Chain Consulting, whose 10-phase supply chain strategy is helping offsite manufacturing plants run lean, smart, and efficient. From bomb to P-bomb, from supplier negotiation to innovation tackling. This is the roadmap to building without interruption. But before we get into any or all of this, we got to give a big shout out to some of our supplying members. Cobalt Creed, they service builders, developers, prefab home builders, and manufacturers, allowing them to achieve the highest levels of comfort, indoor air quality, and low energy costs with their HVAC systems installed for their projects and their customers. Their approach is simple. By using their proprietary small-duct high-velocity central heating and cooling system, learn more at cobaltcreed.com. A few words from these supporting members, and we're going to get right into it with Bob. Stay tuned. CombiLift is the largest global manufacturer of multi-directional forklifts and straddle carriers, a leader in long load handling solutions, offering a free warehouse and site optimization design service. CombiLift helps companies of all sizes and from every industry maximize the capacity, safety, and efficiency of their warehouse and storage facilities. A big thank you to Paul Short and the team at CombiLift for helping us all to build it better. Visit them at combilift.com. Forward Solutions Group is successfully driving companies to succeed where others have failed. Are you looking to start a factory, optimize your existing factory, streamline your production, or take your team to the next level? Whatever your needs are, Forward has a solution for you. Reach out to Ben at forwardsolutionsgroup.com. All right, a big shout out to all of our supporting members. And hey, listen, you got to join us at Greenville. That's what's in front of my face right here. That's right. We have a 20 by 40 stage in LA, November 4th through the 7th. The stage is open 5th through the 6th, and we got some heavy hitters going to be on that stage. We are working on how do we rebuild LA? How do we rebuild from the fire devastation that happened there? And listen, if you click on that link or get that QR code right there, you're going to get yourself 20% off. And by the way, there's free access. That's right, free access just to the trade show floor. If you have no desire to go to any of the other speaking education sessions, Because on the show floor is where we're located, and there's going to be plenty of education happening there. So make sure you take a picture of that QR code. We'll put it up during the show. All right, let's bring Bob onto the show. Bob, how are you, my friend?
Fine, Dave. What about yourself today? Thanks for having me on board.
You know, it's one of those days, Bob. It's Monday. We got 4.5 days to keep building it better. I'm all riled up. It's 5 p.m. here on the East Coast, so we're getting a little bit of a late start. But hey, that's what happens, man. Business happens, and we move on, and we keep grooving until we get the show going. But Bob, before we get into the conversation about supply chain, before we get into your tenured, and I say tenured history of what you do, because you have worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, to include the offsite space, we want to know everything about you. From the moment you were born to this very moment in time, Bob, do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital. We're going to have somebody on the show, and they're going to give us all the dirt. But in the meantime, the floor is yours. You got a minute and a half to talk.
Thank you, Dave, so much. So I was fortunate to be born in the New York area, and my parents moved us down to Delaware, the first state that ratified the Constitution, by the way, and lived there for 20 years of my life. I grew up with high school and played sports. And fortunately, we moved many times in our life, but went to college. And after college, we moved to Colorado, which was the big highlight of our life back in the late 90s. So I came out here to work for Georgia Pacific Corporation. And basically, we were responsible for sales, marketing, and purchasing for about 25 large distribution yards west of the Mississippi. During that time period, I was able to make great connections with many mills, OSB, lumber engineering suppliers, engineered wood suppliers, and I still have those connections today, which has really helped me with my newer business. After that, I worked for Emerson Processes. We had 247 plants around the world. I actually had 5 managers report to me from around the world, which was really a lot of fun, but the time zones certainly were hazardous throughout my career. It was either 4 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night talking to different countries. But I learned a lot about process management and a plan for every part. In the last 5 years, I did my first project in consulting because I decided the modular place was important because there's no affordable housing, especially in Colorado. So what's great about the modular world is that it does offer the opportunity for plants to build where it's appropriate, smaller, cozy, but affordable homes compared to the norms in the marketplace. And I believe in that philosophy, and that's what I've worked on as I start my 17th project in modular. And I developed a system called the 10 phases of starting a supply chain from scratch, or if a plant is having a problem with supply chain, I can come in the middle of that stream and correct the flow.
So let's start from the beginning here, right? You know, because you are working with several modular manufacturers, and you don't have to name them if you don't want to, but some of the bigger players that are out there have tapped into your expertise on this. But I mean, everybody struggles with supply chain, especially in the modular manufacturing industry. There's a lot of ebb and flow in production lines. Sometimes you're so busy you can't get it all out. Other times you're furloughing people in the factory, you know, to the soup line because you don't have enough coming in. And that's a really hard thing to manage. In your experience from going into these and seeing these manufacturers in the modular and just offsite in general, you know, what is the biggest thing that you notice? And then let's get into the 10 phases once you answer that.
Sure. You know, Dave, so it's a really good question. So initially I find out that most plants don't have a formidable or a serious game plan. I tell my clients, look, if you want to act like a Fortune 500 company, you have to play ball like one. And that includes having a formidable plan for every single part that you have in your facility. And that doesn't happen very often, but I have a process that really seems to have worked. You know, a good example is, how can you avoid stockouts? How can you plan further ahead so you don't have stockouts? And part of that comes from you have an organized plan that starts within the plant. Part of that is you have to have good inventory controls. Do you have daily cycle counts? How many? Are you counting the same parts over and over again? When that happens, sometimes the inventory control specialist will just count the same parts because they haven't moved since yesterday. That creates a problem. A good physical inventory once a month is also very crucial. But also I find that you need to know your counts just by walking around. That information for inventory comes back to purchasing so we can plan more effectively. But the big key is having a plan for every single part, which starts from the BOM list. And that's where the 10 processes I developed really help a modular plant because it's organized and it's trackable. There's a lot of accountability in supply chain, but a lot of people don't really follow a path. And I have a path that's worked really well as I start my 17th project. And it's worked in every single one. In most cases, we've never had a stock out. If we have, it's usually due to truck breaks down, the mill burns down, and or the BN goes on strike.
Right. So what is step one of a 10-phase, supply chain process?
So the first thing when I engage with a plant, I sit down with the engineering and the design team. What are you building? Why are you building this? What's the market like? What's the internal structure look like? Are there going to be any difficult parts that we can't find because they're long lead times or they're expensive? Have that communication at the beginning and get to build those relationships with that part of the team. That's the first most crucial step. So I can understand what the plans look like, review the plans, what are the takeoffs, and what are the early bombs look like. That's the first step, to have good communication, understand what we're building and why.
So the first step's understanding what we're building and why. So what is the secret then behind all of this, right? I think you called it a PFEP, plan for every part.
All right, and that comes from my days with Emerson and large companies, because the bigger companies, they do have a plan for every part, and I mean every part. If you have 55,000 parts in a big company manufacturing plant, sorry to say, but there's a plan for every part, whether you like it or not. That way you don't run out of parts because you have a strategy. So in this business, it's typically between 700 to maybe 2,000 parts. It's not as many, but you still need to have a really good game plan. So what happens is initially you formulate a BOM, which usually comes from design or engineering. And the BOM is basically a series of 15 to 20 categories, like first floor, second floor, roofing, siding, HVAC, et cetera, et cetera. And from that and below that, each particular category is the description of the part, maybe the brand name, maybe a manufacturer's name, and then how many pieces does it require for the project. If you have that much information, that's a good starting point, because then you can start to think about a plan for every part. Yeah. So you really take the BOM, you turn it into what's called a P-BOM or purchasing BOM, then you put another column in besides the cost. Is okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do and why. Do I need to bring in 3 months of materials for a project that's only doing one house a month? Probably not. So that's where I start to assign specific strategies for each particular part. And I mean, each particular part has a place and a time, how much we're going to buy, when we're going to bring it in, how much it costs, and how that fits over time with that production for that project.
You sound like a guy that loves spreadsheet and numbers.
Well, my wife is a retired CFO for some big companies, and she does spreadsheets on a whole different reality. But yes, it's you can have a simple program if you have the right software program, like a Modular or whatever you decide to use. It can work really well. But in the beginning, you must work with the BOM and come up with a plan for every single part. And I can give you plenty of examples if it's necessary.
Yeah, and for those of you that are watching this don't understand what a BOM is, and we're not talking about what's happening overseas type BOM, but the BOM is basically it's the blown up version of the kit of parts that makes the house. So you blow it out, and then you can see every little nick and cranny, screw, pin, washer, nail, pieces of wood, whatever the case may be. So. So you come up, so you have the BOM and you blow it up. When we look at manufacturing and modular today, and I know you're working with some companies that do, a very productized approach, but a lot of the companies are taking what they can get, right? And it's not productized, it's very bespoke. How do you plan for the ever-changing happenings of designs of homes or buildings going through a plant? It sounds like it could be a lot of work.
It really is. And it's different for every plant, but the biggest key is having superb supplier connections and relationships. Fortunately, as I mentioned earlier, with my time with Georgia Pacific, I have all these great mill connections, but also connections with window manufacturers, door manufacturers, truss plants, flooring manufacturers. It makes a big difference because you can work with those suppliers and some distributors. Distributors are still important to create programs so you don't run out of material. A good example is creating vendor managed inventory programs, which I've done probably 200 or 300 in my career. That's basically where the supplier comes in, maybe a rep once a week. He looks at your bins that are all barcoded, and they are you have minimums and maximums for each particular product. Works really well with electrical and plumbing, and basically does a count, and then it's restocked the next day, usually by the vendor. So your own staff doesn't have to worry about that. It makes a huge difference.
Wow.
And you work on that every day to make sure you don't run out of materials. You can have those in WIP, or you can have them in separate areas of the company. VMIs are big. Also, another plan is to do off-site inventory. So I try to make arrangements if the plan is big enough with suppliers where within 1 hour of us driving time, there's another $500,000 as an example of inventory. We're not paying for it yet, but it's there for us. They're common items, and that's our backup plan in case something breaks down. So with those two things, you have a plan for every part. Part of it is VMI or consignment, but also you have offsite inventory. That's something I've learned in the global supply chain world. You need to have offsite inventory all over the world just in case, the plant blows up in China or gets hit by a tidal wave, which it has done in my career.
So are you telling me that you have the ability, if I'm a manufacturer owner or I'm building a manufacturing plant, it can be like a grocery store where the vendors come in and make sure my parts are where they need to be and I have the appropriate amount of parts. Like, you ever go in a grocery store, you always have the vendors in there doing their bags of chips and all this stuff. You're saying that the same thing should be and can happen in a manufacturing facility?
That is correct. You have to put together a contract or an agreement to make sure that the business is, first of all, big enough, but it's steady. But VMIs work very, very well. You can check with Home Depot. 80% of their stores are allegedly with VMIs. Some of those are also consignment programs, but they don't have the time to go out and count everything. They're too busy. They're too busy stocking shelves at night, and they don't have time to count inventory all the time. So the barcodes, and when people buy things, goes through the register, it reorders products. That can be done as well in the plant, but the VMIs work great because they're managed by the supplier. Obviously, you have to have the trust and the responsibility of the supplier in a plant, but I do business with people that they're the least of my worries because they know that if they do it correctly, the business will continue. And these programs are only as good as if they're repeated from year to year. Then they're special.
It's funny. I've been in manufacturing plants all around the world, and I'm starting to see a lot more of them using almost like a vending machine that can keep track of the kit of parts, especially when it's like saw blades or, nail something or another. But even like plates and stuff, they have these vending machines, and when they need parts, they can punch in what the job or whatever is, and all the parts come out for it, which I think is pretty cool, especially if you're not in an automated environment. So in the 10-phase, process, walk me through, just give me like the heading of all 10 phases. So one, you have to sit down and say, hey, what the heck are you building? 2, you have to understand the BOM. 3, then you have to make a material list, right? Am I on track with this?
You are. So here's kind of a snapshot of it. So once you get through the BOM, bill of material development, which is usually and hopefully done by your client because you want to make sure that it's correct and they know what they're building better than you do. And then you have to start to set up suppliers, contact suppliers. You have to contact suppliers in a way that it's going to build the relationships for a long time. You have to contact as many as 3 to 4 suppliers for one part. You've got to shop it around. Then you start putting out the RFQs to the suppliers. You have to get your line of credit set up. And then what's really important is you have to negotiate formidable commercial payment terms for your customers. So I always try to offer 45 to 90-day terms, try to get cash discounts if we pay on time, as well as incentivized return programs like rebates, as well as longer-term discounts based on volume. That's part of the 10 phases. But also, what's really important, the next step is how do you implement and manage the software system? So I have about 3 software systems that I recommend. So what we do is we bring those systems in once the customer decides he wants to buy those. If he doesn't, then we work on spreadsheets for a while, and that's fine. But if you have an ERP, MRP implementation, there's a training period before it goes live. You play in the sandbox, but eventually you have to learn that system because it's going to run the system because there's a lot of numbers that I need to know, and the staff need to know, because if the president of the company walks up and says, what's the value of my inventory today? Well, your ERP system can tell you that pretty quickly.
So when, as a manufacturer and sourcing the materials for our manufacturing plants, you're right. I mean, normally as a builder, there's a middle person, right? The supplier, the Home Depot of the world, so to speak, right? Or the lumber yard of the world. What you're saying is that they don't need to do that. They can actually go direct to the manufacturer and get direct manufacturer's pricing. Is that for all materials, or is there limits to how you can buy this product?
It's a great question. Once you're used to buying direct, you want to buy direct.
Yeah.
Because you know how to buy direct. You know how to buy direct domestically and globally. So there are those opportunities, but what happens is the terms are a little more narrow. Most terms are 30 to 60 to 90 days. If you buy direct from a mill, it's probably going to be net 10, maybe net 11. However, the savings that you can reap from purchasing direct are significant at times. It depends on what happened in the marketplace. If the mills have already moved up 20%, the wholesalers and distributors haven't moved up that much yet, they have a good position, it may not pay. But to build those direct connections for the long term with not just OSB and lumber mills, where it's possible, also your window manufacturer, your flooring manufacturers, there's really no need to buy from distributors, except in cases where maybe you're small enough, or perhaps the finances aren't there. But you will need distributors. You will need fill-ins. They play an important part of a good example is someone like a Wesco. I can't buy those products that Wesco brings into the U.S. because they're from China or from Taiwan. I can't go there unless I would buy containers full, which is rare unless you're a really large multi-location company. But direct is the way to go if it's possible. If not, then you look at some of the national distributors who really do a great job.
From the time you start working with a manufacturing facility to the time you can get them set up, let's say they picked an ERP like a Modular or one of the other ones that are out there. How long does this take? I mean, does it take a long time?
It really doesn't. The whole process for setting up a supplier, direct or indirect, is usually about 2 to 4 weeks, because you have to obviously have a letter of credit, have 3 references, have a banking reference, just determine what your line of credit's going to be, have someone sign a credit application. Sometimes I actually get the authority to sign a credit application, which I don't mind doing. But that doesn't really take that long. It's all of how long does it take to get that information back to get set up. So if you're buying direct from John's lumber mill, it might take your credit department, if they're really backed up, it might take a couple of weeks to work all those numbers back and forth. Usually within 30 days, that's my limit, which I try to impose to have everything set up. So when you set up a new mod plant, you might be setting up 30 to 60 suppliers, which is
30 to 60, right? So here's the thing I want a lot of people to really understand, right? My grandfather taught me this, Bob, right? There's 2 ways to learn. You can go out and try it yourself and get your ass handed to you, for excuse my French, or you can go to school and get an education, or you can hire somebody that's been to school and got that education and has done it so much, right? There's a cost to everything, and I think is we're looking to really grow the offsite space, right? What's modular? 3%. I think we were talking about there. It's been 3% for 20 some years now. And I think part of it is, having the skills, the knowledge, being able to be price competitive, and being price competitive means going direct to the manufacturer, not through a third party. So you're paying, where a big developer pays $30 for a toilet, but it costs you $100 because they're buying direct, right? And I think that's where, a lot of value comes in this conversation, Bob, is somebody like yourself, who I've known, you worked with companies in Colorado and California and Texas, right? And I know a lot of these companies, they come to you and they say, all right, listen, fix us, make us run smooth, lean, and fast. So our supply chain's there. So if you're just joining us, this is about supply chain optimization, period. How do you have that supply chain? How do you have the product when you need it? Kind of like on-time delivery. So my next question. So Bob, you come in and you save the day and you get me all fixed and sorted out. And now I know how much product it is. In fact, all my products are kind of like QuickBooks now. Like I know my cash flow. I know where it's going. I know when it's coming out. But you don't stay there and do this for them every day. That means you have to train and hire and train people, right? Or train the existing people. How hard is that? And is it hard to teach old dog new tricks? You know, because sometimes people don't like change.
That's a really good, another good question. And what I find is I know people very well about the skill sets that are required to be a great buyer, to be a great purchasing manager. And I find that the best ones are the ones that want to learn. They want to learn the systems. They want to learn about the products. We ask them to get online. Okay, let's pull up Georgia Pacific and look up the 50 products that we're going to buy from them. Or from Wesco, what are those products? Where do they fit into the plant? How do the parts fit into the walls? What are they used for? And those people who have that level of interest, I find, are the best employees. The ones that have pretty good, don't have to be a 10, because no one has a 10 in Microsoft Excel, trust me. If someone has good Microsoft Excel skills, they can do spreadsheets. But most of all, people who are interested in the business that want to move ahead, I will share everything I know about business, the supply chain, even at an executive level. If you really want to learn, I'll share every number with you if you're an employee that I'm allowed to share with you, because the more they know about the company in the future and the projects, they are going to be better staff members, and it's critical for them to be part of the team.
Yeah, for sure. And when do you come in on a project? Do you go into existing manufacturing plants only, or are you working with manufacturers that are opening up new facilities? Or somebody like me, because Bob never ran a manufacturing facility. I know a lot about them, but I couldn't tell you how to set up my supply chain to work efficiently.
You know, Dave, it's all of the above. You know, 70% of what I've done so far has been from new plants where the building was just erected and made and the cranes are set. That's usually when I go in. So we can start to set up where the supply goes around the plant and in the plant and with suppliers. And that's really great, because then you can really start from the very, very basics, because you haven't hired anybody yet in supply chain. You've got time to plan the teachings, etc. Right. Recently, I'm working on a project in the Southeast where I'm coming into midstream, where basically, you know, things haven't worked out in supply chain in the last couple of years. Got a lot of stock outs. Our prices are awful. We're not competitive. We're just buying from the same people we have been for years. Good suppliers, nice people, but unfortunately, we think we can buy better. We're not leveraging our spend. We're not going to suppliers, for example, and taking what's called a firm offer, where we go back. We're not countering very much. You can't always counter, but you try when you can. None of that is happening. So we have big projects coming up for $50 million to $100 million of spend. We need to make sure we're managing that spend competitively, fairly, and to grow the business, because we're going to buy better than we did before. So I work both ways.
Yeah. All right, tariffs. I mean, they're hurting everybody at some point or another in a manufacturing facility. Have you been busier since the tariffs kicked in all around the world with the supply chain, or has it not really affected, the manufacturers? Have you had to help them resource products, resource lumber?
Well, yes, and yes. What happened recently is, there's a new tariff on cabinets from Vietnam, and that's affected two of my really good suppliers I've known for years. So unfortunately, some of these suppliers may not be in existence when we wake up tomorrow morning. They're just big U.S. distributors, so I've had to go back and find, U.S.-based sources, which is very, very most unfortunate. The tariffs so far, in most cases, have been absorbed by the suppliers. We don't know how much longer that's going to last, and if the tariffs especially increase January 1st, eventually materials are going to cost more. However, right now, in the next 2 to 3 months is a great time to get in and negotiate for the future, because business is not that great around the country. As you know, the home building business is down, construction's down in our business. The modular business is pretty flat. So it's a great time right now to go in and negotiate longer term programs like VMIs, better pricing, before all these tariffs go too crazy and too haywire. So now's the time to try to lock in the longer term pricing and try to get guaranteed pricing based on the volume. Right now, these suppliers need business. The door is open as we speak.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. And I can definitely see, like, now's the time and you have the power, right? Because they want to sell more product. And if they can lock you in, that's kind of what you're saying there. So walk me through, how do you measure success in this industry, right? As far as what you're doing, how do you actually, once you come in, you set them up, can you measure performance? Can you measure, production time up, down based on materials that are being used or being sourced or are locked out? Where's the power lie for the owner of one of these manufacturing facilities?
When it relates to the supply chain side, a lot of it is the easy stuff, on-time shipments, late orders, early shipments, but also the biggest thing is the performance by the suppliers in a couple of different areas. One is innovation. So my best suppliers, when I do supplier scorecards, which I try to do once or twice a year, and it's a 360 process. We sit down, mano a mano, face to face, and talk about what's working and what isn't. Why isn't it working? Are we really telling you about our future? Do you understand what we're building and why? You understand how many units we're going to build? We sit down and go over it and exchange ideas in a really wide open format. And it's one of the best formats ever because you learn a lot about each other, what you know and what you don't know. But what's really important with my suppliers is, what are you doing for me in regards to new products, innovation? How can you save time and money for me in a plant with, a product that's 2 foot shorter, costs a little bit less, but it saves me 10 minutes a shift times lots of shifts throughout the year? That's why we look for a dynamic program with suppliers, because that will affect production. That will affect our profitability over time.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of putting the suppliers to work for you, right? They should be an extension of your team to help you continually improve. That's where they earn their value, and that's how they keep their business. That's how they keep your business, right?
That is correct. So if you don't share information about your company with suppliers, then they won't know. The worst thing that they should know about is what you can tell about your financials, about your press releases in advance, your plans for the next 2 years. Are going to buy another plan, but basically, what are we going to build for the next 6 months? Here they are. Here's our plans. Look at our plans. How would you build these houses? What products would you put in place that maybe we're not thinking clearly about? Mm-hmm. Are we spending too much money on this particular part or product or process? How can you show us how to save time by training the staff how to spray paint more effectively for drywall, how to put up siding the right way? All those things with suppliers come in and help us with, they make a big difference in the long-term relationship and the profitability of the plant.
So the big question for manufacturers out there is, do I need an ERP system? Or, the spreadsheets are working. Why should I change, Bob? What are you seeing? Is there an ROI by implementing a real internal system that tracks this automatically and shows you dashboards, all that stuff?
I don't think there really is in the beginning, because unless you've had the time to go out and evaluate 3 or 4 dynamic ERP and MRP systems, like you got NetSuite, you can look at Oracle, you can look at Modular. There's a lot of differences between those, and to be able to understand the differences and the advantages and benefits for you as a company, it's going to take a while. So it depends on the timing. If you're going to open up a plant 6 months, you want to start studying those systems as soon as possible. But if you open and you're not ready, you start out with simple spreadsheets, with formulas in there to manage your inventory. You can create PO systems easily with a spreadsheet system. You can create a receiving log, which is very important in your business, with a spreadsheet for a while. Maybe that's the way you run until things get better, until you have more finances, so you really have studied those ERP systems. But the thing about ERP systems, the one advantage is they will tell you the numbers that you need to know on a regular basis, and those numbers are critical. Things such as, how much is on order right now? How much do we owe the suppliers? Do we have 500,000 that's in our AP for 30 days, or do we have 100,000? They're all the things that a ERP system can probably show you, especially inventory values, and also what's in WIP, and also what is the percentage of completion at station number 15. They're the things you're not going to have available on a spreadsheet, but you will in an ERP system.
Yeah, no, for sure. Bob, what have I left out of this conversation? If you had, one thing to tell the world out there that's in manufacturing of housing, and we're trying to increase, attainable housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever somebody wants to call it today. What is it? What are we missing?
You need to have a game plan. If you think you can just go out and buy materials and try to match the inventory and the production levels that you're planning for, it's difficult to do that without a serious game plan. And you need a game plan that's trackable, that shows that you are making progress. It's just like put a graph in of here's the 10 phases that Bob works on. Are they completed yet? So what I do is once the phase is complete, it's green lighted, it's done. Once you create a P-bomb, okay, and you give the green light to buy, it's bought. And that's your progress. That's how you track that process. But many people don't have anything like that. They go out and they just buy and they hope it's as close as possible to the build, because maybe in some cases they don't even have a BOM yet. So the biggest key in my mind is have a formidable plan and look at it often, look at it every day, and then know your numbers, know your inventory value. But maybe as important as knowing the prices of your material. The worst thing that could ever happen is like when I work for GPs, if a VP came up to me and said, hey, Bob, what's the price of OSB today? You got to know that number. Where is it trending? If you don't know those particular prices or the trends, then what happens if you get a bump, a mill goes on strike, boom, it's up 25%, you missed it, then you're in major trouble for the quotes that you put out for 6 months. So having a plan and knowing your numbers, that's the job of supply chain, and you need to do it really well.
Love it. Is there anything else that we missed, Bob?
I don't think so. Supply chain is probably boring to some people, but it's actually an integral part of the organization. And I find that the plants I go into and make these changes, it really does work, and it works for a long time. And I still remain on retainer, or I'm an agent of change when they need me. So I'm always available to help the plants. They call me anytime after the program is done. I don't charge them anything afterwards. I'm here as a brother for the long time.
Well, listen, I mean, this is interesting, right? We talked about this. I mean, you've already done your career. This is just something you're passionate about, right? Obviously not passionate enough to work for free the rest of your, life, especially in this industry. But that's really what I love about this. I mean, you're in it for all the right reasons. And that clearly shows based on, some of the factories that you've worked in and the people that we mutually know that are out there that have utilized your services. And I think that for a lot of factories out there struggling, supply chain is really the backbone. You're not building anything without the supply chain, because if you can't get the supplies, you ain't building anything. Exactly. I don't think it gets any more real than that. Bob, appreciate you joining us on the show today, man. This is great. Let me just take a quick look here real quick. Carolina says, this was excellent conversation. Thanks so much. Hey, Carolina, good to see you. Hey, thanks for sticking with us today. We had some cancellations and restarts on how we had to get this show up and running, but we are here. There you go. Greg Ugaldi, very informative DC Live, Dave and Bob. If you don't know Greg is the past chair of the National Association of Home Builders. Still gets to update the president on housing every once in a while. But he hasn't taken me yet. I want to go. I don't care who's in office. I just want to go. Anywho, Bob, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Well, for the rest of you out there, you got to come see us at Greenbuild, everybody. 20 by 40 stage right on the middle of the convention floor. We're going to be doing education sessions. We have heavy hitters. In fact, Steve Glenn, Plant Prefab, is going to be one of our speakers that's going to be there. Vikas from Reframe Systems, one of our speakers, is going to be there. We're going to release all those speakers here in the next couple of days, but that just gives you a little bit of insight who's going to be there. And you can get your discount code right there. 20% off. DC Live is the discount code. Put it in there. And by the way, you can get free Expo Pass as well if you're just going to the Expo and not all the training sessions. So make sure you get that QR code, you join up, and you visit us in LA. All right, Bob, that's a wrap for today's show. Don't go anywhere. I'll come back to you after the outro. But for the rest of you out there, it's only Monday, man. We got 4.5 days to keep building it better. So as soon as you say thank you to all these supporting members, you can get back to doing all that great work of building houses. I'm Dave Cooper. Bob Snyder, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you, and as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching.